Hey, it's Laura here. I wanted to make a little video about some answers to questions that we have heard from people. So, the first question that seems to come up so often is, how is our acupuncture machine different from the ones that you have been using, like TENS units and that kind of thing, or from the acupuncture machines that most acupuncturists use? And the answer to this question is kind of in two parts. The first part is how a TENS unit works. So a traditional TENS unit works by the mechanism called the spinal pain gate. And what that means is that when the nerves run up your spinal cord, they can only carry one piece of information at a time. And that gate where the information goes through from, say, your arm or your leg into your spinal cord is in a certain part of the spinal column, and this is where the blocking occurs. So if you have a pain, let's say coming from your foot, that's coming up from your foot, and we put a TENS unit on your back at your lumbar vertebrae, the TENS unit will be going pulse, 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 pulse. And that pulsing will be information coming in from the side, and your foot pain is coming up from a lower level. And the spine can only carry one of those two pieces of information at the same time. So it tends to transmit the sensation of pulsing from the TENS unit, tapping in your low back. The pain sensations coming up from your foot can't go there because they're blocked by the TENS unit. Now, the problem with a TENS unit is that it is what we call low voltage and high amperage. The FDA says that you can only use a medical device that is no more than 27 volts. And so all those kinds of devices, TENS units, are usually limited to 27 volts, and that is also true of our little acupuncture stimulators that we used to use for the past 30 years, 27 volts, because that's considered safe. Now, what's really safe is the amount of amperage, which is current. So that's the amount of electrons that are flowing out of it. The voltage is like in a battery, it's like potential energy. But the amperage, amps or current, that's the amount of electrons that are actually coming out. So what happens is in a low voltage unit, like a 27 volt TENS machine or acupuncture simulator, you're putting in low voltage and high amperage. That means like a ton of electrons are coming out, and they're very underpowered because it's low voltage. So the voltage tells you how much power is pushing those electrons, kind of like water coming through a hose. On the low voltage TENS machines, you have a big hose with a lot of electrons coming with not very much force behind them. On the devices that we use, which are high voltage, low amperage units, the high voltage says there's a lot of energy pushing these electrons, but the electrons are coming from a tiny little hole. It's a little stream of electrons with a lot of energy behind them, so they can go a long way and they can get a lot of work done, which is what we want. And that's one of the reasons why you don't feel anything, because we use resistors. You might have taken physics. There was this thing called V equals IR, the relationship between resistance and current and voltage. We reduce the amount of current with resistors. So the electrons are coming out a tiny hole, but they have a lot of energy behind them because they're being pushed by a big battery, this voltage, 200 volts or 500 volt machine, but it's safe because we're controlling the amount of electrons. So it's like a tiny hose, but it's shooting out with a lot of force, which is what we want because we're trying to add energy to your body so that the body can build up its reserves of energy so that it can do what it needs to do. And we're not interested in using these devices to cover up your pain. What we're most interested in is using these devices to give your body the electrical resources that it needs to build itself new, to restore its own function, to reset your systems back to, what do they call that? Original specifications. That's our objective. And we know that you want your pain better, but we also know that your pain can improve the most by healing the body, and that you don't really want another Band-Aid because that's just the same old thing. You know, we're acupuncturists, we're holistic medicine, we do what we consider a better thing. So we're using high voltage, low amperage machines using resistors to make those electrons flow through a tiny hole, and that's why you can't feel anything. The other thing that we do is we put those needles really far away from each other. So the electrons have to follow a long path to get from the red to the black. If I put the red and the black really close together in like your hand or your ear, you will feel it. So what I'm doing is I'm putting both reds over here and both blacks over here, and then it's a longer path for them to connect. Or I'll put red, black, and red, black on your feet, and then again, they're so far apart you can't feel it. We can turn the machine up to the full 500 volts or whatever it is, and you won't feel a thing, so that we can give you the most dose possible. So hopefully that answers at least the beginning of your questions about our devices. Thanks for watching.